All right, we're back with episode 56, the Weekly Boost podcast. Apologize in advance if you hear my air conditioner. It's still really hot here. Um, how we'll start there. Like, how are you adjusting? Are you missing Wisconsin weather yet? I know it's been pretty similar up there than it has down here, but where you at with
Yeah.
that?
Um, I, I think my lifetime of summer baseball has conditioned me to work well in the heat just because summer baseball is just brutal. You're playing like 6 games a weekend or sometimes more and just 90-degree heat and humidity. So I think I'm becoming accustomed to that. But down here, it's just, it'll take the energy out of you real quick. It's pretty
Yeah,
incredible. You never
yeah,
realize that until you've like you and I were golfing this past week, and
yeah,
like even though we took the cart, I was still gassed afterwards. Like you're just like, oh my goodness, that heat drains you.
yeah. It does, and I don't want to say I'm coming around to it because I definitely miss like Wisconsin Springs and stuff.
Yeah,
But it'll be interesting to see how you appreciate fall and the
yeah,
extended golf season for sure.
yeah. Fall's my
Uh,
favorite season, so I'm looking forward to maybe a little bit more moderate temperature
yeah.
fall and not so fluxing and shifting between really cold, really warm. I'm hoping
Well,
it
do you
stays
remember?
somewhat.
Did we talk about this before? Like a couple years ago, it might have been your senior year of high school or your
Hmm.
freshman year. It's like 80 something degrees, and it was like 85 in October.
Yeah,
And we were in the dorms at Ripon at least, and it was brutal. But no air conditioning over there in the
yeah,
quad.
yeah, brutal.
Um, but today we're going to talk a little bit about stress. I know I've been going through
Yeah.
bouts of it, especially
Mhm.
recently with the semester starting up. I know I'm really excited to get going on my classes and really excited for like the crossover work that I can do with my thesis and some of my classes and things like that. But I mean, we're just going to talk about it in general. And some of this um, might seem pretty like no brainer what we're
Yeah,
talking about, but I think it's worth mentioning and shedding a
yeah,
light on it too, especially with, I know we're passionate about Movember and just mental health issues as a whole. We've talked
mhm,
about a couple times on here, but and then we'll get into different ways that of handling it, both good and bad, and
yeah.
yeah, go from there. But I mean, what kind of stressors right now are you
Oh, man.
experiencing? Like just moving
Yeah.
down to a different state. You're on your own now. Um, like, how has that been?
Well, you start to realize how many things you take for granted growing up in a place, kind of realizing and understanding, where everything's at and making relationships with like vendors and businesses that you like frequently go to. Like for example, one of the stressors right now, my car needs an oil change. And I'm just
Mm,
like searching through the places to go to because I don't have my mechanic that I did back at home. And I just send it to him and he'd take care of it and it'd be easy peasy. But down here I'm trying to, I don't want to get uh, kind of like more service imposed on me after I pick up my vehicle and stuff because I'm afraid of that happening. I don't want something
yeah,
to go wrong with it, and I don't want upcharge too because they
it,
realize they'd be like, oh, Wisconsin points. Let's just
that happened to
you
me.
know yeah. And
Uh,
I'm saying this because I heard your story and it makes me nervous because I
yeah.
don't mess around with car stuff. Like I'll
Well,
either take
that's
care of it or get a really good professional to do it.
absolutely like that's the thing. Like once you have your guy, that you
Yeah, yeah,
trust with that.
right. And I
Because
will, if I ever live in Wisconsin again, I will always bring my car to him because he has
yeah,
never done me wrong and never steered me in the wrong direction.
that
And
was my thing.
you don't realize how bad that is, like how much that matters,
Yeah.
right? It's crazy.
Well, and it's a big worry or source of
Hmm.
worry when they're like, oh yeah, like for me, they're like, yeah, you got an oil leak. It'll probably run you about 3,500 4 grand. I was like,
What?
it came out of nowhere. Like the last time,
Yeah,
like you think they would have saw something like that that's going to
yeah,
be, you know, um, pretty significant price wise. And then I took it
it's
home
crazy.
over Christmas break. We weren't going to take my car, but we ended up taking my car to kind of get it looked at by our guy.
Hmm.
And sure enough, it's like, yeah, it's really minor. It probably won't be an issue for, you know, 60,000 miles or whatever. It's like, well, then, you know what I mean? Like, and who knows if the Wisconsin plates did it or it was a slow month at the dealership
Yeah,
or wherever I took it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, at the most basic level, a stressor is just something that causes like this physical tension in you.
yeah.
And for me, that's been, determining where where to look for PhD programs and where to apply for this, and getting off on the right foot with my classes and not falling behind on work and my thesis, and like all these other things kind of compounding on top of a pandemic and global conflict right now. And not that affects me, but just, sympathy and empathy for the individuals in Louisiana right now and in the deep South. Like, there's a lot going on in the world, and I think it's important to find ways to work through some of those stressors without it becoming a chronic like thing. Because like stress for me is always like, even throughout jobs, it's like it's hard to find that balance where you can just turn everything off and stop worrying about it. But like I think it's important to note too that like stress can be good. Like stress for athletes, it can kind of elevate their game, or stress for yourself. You think about when you're procrastinating on a paper, right? Like that stress of getting a deadline sometimes brings out your best work. At least for me, like I've noticed,
exactly
like
right.
we've talked about that like never ending cycle that just reinforces itself. So I hope I don't get back into it, but I already know I will for this semester. But so sometimes stress can be positive, but I think it's just managing it and keeping your cortisol levels down and everything to kind of use the stress in a positive, meaningful way, and not kind of let it compound like I had been talking about.
Well, and you're exactly right. And the positivity of stress is something that's, I think, seldom talked about unless those specific cases of, like athletic success or,
Mm-hmm.
kind of that career push that people need sometimes. Currently going through a positive, stressful environment right now with the integration of graduate school work.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of under an obligation based off of my hiring parameters that I need to be in the lab an allotted amount of time. And part of that is me understanding that lab research isn't a 9 to 5 structured schedule, but the hourly thing that HR paperwork goes through, administrative duties go through, they label it as 9 to 5. And so like I'm trying to sit there and break this barrier of, okay, there's a 9 to 5 schedule that I should be following, quote unquote, but lab research never follows it. And so like gauging what I need to do to spend time appropriately in the lab as well as appropriately outside of the lab to prepare myself to actually, conduct the experiments, get a better understanding, background information, so that way I don't come in there and not knowing why I'm doing something, because I think that's an important thing as well, as not just going through the motions, but actually learning why I'm doing this process, or why I'm, dedicating such and such amount of time to sterility, or like, keeping things, aseptic, right? So like I have to sit down and think about these things, and I always get nervous that like I'm doing it wrong because I'm not giving the 9 to 5 structure credit in my position, even though it's nobody expects me to, that I'm working with. It's just something that I'm going through. And so I think that helps me get, pushes me to, okay, let's get in the lab today. Let's dive in and do some gene sequencing analysis. Like, I think it gets me ready. And, that's kind of like what my statement is to support the positive influence of stress, because it's something, again, you and I talk about it quite a bit. We talk about stress and talk about the stuff going on in our lives because, we like to keep that in conversation and kind of keep people updated and aware of what's going on. But we don't really talk about like those positive ones a lot, even in our conversations. So it's kind of interesting that we're able to break it down that way and reflect on some of the impacts that it has on our life. So,
and you had noted kind of what I was going to say too, is like it does enhance your motivation for like a new job, or like we've talked about like putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation promotes growth, whether it's like between the lines, like we always talk about, or at your new job, or in your schoolwork, or relationship stuff. Like putting yourself out there, not a dating pod, but putting yourself in a vulnerable spot that causes your kind of instincts, there we go again, like on intuition and things like that, like to take over and do the right thing without thinking and getting in your own way. Because I've noticed that too. It's like you let fear kind of own the stress, as opposed to like I said, like using that energy for a more useful
Yeah.
thing that's going to lead to a good start off at a job or career growth, or like, and people bond over stress too. And I think that's important. Like in a job where they have a lot of pressure, like all of you can kind of rally around that identifier that, we need to do this by this time. And especially if it's like a big project in corporate America, let's say. But um, and another thing, like the stress of just this pandemic, right? It's hard to fathom the amount of people that we've lost in the past year and a half. And what's going on with the variant, and why aren't people vaccinated, like for real meaningful reasons, and why is there so much misinformation, and why is everything so divided, and why are we doing this or doing that as a country? Like, as someone in their mid-20s, starting to kind of figure out this is life now, like,
Yeah.
that's really stressful. And I think it's important to kind of talk to people about it. But at the same time, if you talk, like, this is just my personal experience, like if you keep talking about the negative things that are happening and it sees it all the time, like I find myself in like a really rough mood and hard to get out of it, and I hate to like stay in that, but it's hard to get out of it once you like, again, like you're watching the news, right? Like everything on there is like negative, or to like, not everything, but they'll throw in the good story, whatever. But it is their job to kind of inform people of what's going on, and people are drawn to that, not always negative, but the shocking things, or the things that are potentially harmful to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's hard to escape out of there without kind of sinking down.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And there's so much negativity that we are kind of exposed to, and for good reason, for most of it, because negativity, I think, based on some of the stuff that I've looked at for like communication statistics and like what actually gets people like interested in a topic, is a raw emotion kind of display, right? And so you see like these stories, what you were just talking about on the news, like you have these really, really negative things that people are talking about. Well, it draws out a certain emotion from people.
Mm-hmm.
And what does an emotion gather? Well, it gathers a response, whether it's good or bad. That's where the outlet, the media source, or whatever, doesn't care anymore. As long as it gets a response, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. They just want a response. And so that's like that's what creates messages and memories and drives stuff home.
Yeah.
And so then they sprinkle in like those little positive things just to be like, oh, okay, we're not really interested in the negativity thing. We want responses, good or bad, whatever, doesn't matter. But I think we're going to get into here a little bit how some of the ways that we cope with that, at least you and I do.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to incorporate stuff in our lives that doesn't display inherent bias towards a political party or an ideology or whatnot. And so like, it's hard for us to work around these things. But when we do find something that we think works, we're all for sharing it with you guys. And that's like kind of what we're doing. And so, yeah, I'm going to say this, and this is, we talked about it before, but you and I went golfing yesterday. It was actually our first time going golfing. Kind of totally different backgrounds in golf, and separate skill levels, of course. And like, that's a goal that both of us are working on. But it was a way that I felt like that people can sort of just enjoy conversation, because I'm sure if you and I wanted to, we could get into some sort of debate between something, and just that because of the situation that we're in at that time, all we're going to talk about is that topic, and it's not going to mean anything for our lives. It's just going to be a topic of conversation. I feel like we lack that because everything has to be so, one-sided, or, you can't see the other side of the fence or whatever. And I think we're missing that. So long-windedly, I'm getting at the idea that let's talk to people. Like, get out and actually be able to socialize and communicate in a positive way. And by positive, I mean the idea of just doing it and hearing other people's experiences, hearing their perspectives, and garnishing a greater understanding for what it means to be not you. Because that's where a lot of our misunderstanding is. And that was a really roundabout way to get to the question that I imposed myself of asking, but that wouldn't be the Weekly Booze podcast without long roundabout answers to really simply ask questions. But
so the idea of like these, you're bombarded with politically charged things throughout.
Yeah, and we're gonna be. This is clear the record that causes stress for us. That's one of our a major stressor.
Well, that's
I think myself anyway, is that everything has to have a political charge.
Well, what I was going to say is there's been a study done every year, essentially looking at stress in America, and this is from the American Psychological Association, and
Mhm.
essentially like 60, what is it, 65%, nearly 2 in 3 adults say the current amount of uncertainty in our nation causes them stress. Um, and then 3 in 5 say the number of issues that the America faces is overwhelming. So naturally, like, yes, the state of the nation is inherently stressful for people, right? Like
Yeah.
the less than peaceful transfer of power, the which has happened before. Like it's not January 6th hasn't happened before, but like this animosity and not a peaceful transfer of power is there's been some rocky transfers.
Yeah.
This idea of like Gen Z having stress amplified, like you went through it, right? Like graduating in a pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked
Crazy.
about it a bunch, like on air and off. Like you didn't know what you were going to do. It's uncertainties with graduate schools and uncertainty with moving, and like you don't know what the future holds, and that's really scary.
Yeah.
But also, it's really fun because you can
Yeah.
make it whatever you want. You know,
Exactly. And
like
you're not held to an expectation with
yeah,
uncertainty, right? Because like the expectation is that the uncertain things we don't know, so there shouldn't be an expectation with it. Like
yeah,
you're exactly right with like the grad school stuff. Like there was uncertainty with it, and I think that's why it made it stressful. Yes, but at the same time, it made it entertaining to myself because I was at a point in my life where I could have control over everything and anything that I do, and it was like a first. And look what I did. I moved, X amount of miles
mm-hmm.
away from home. I'm doing a field of study that wasn't necessarily my, like my childhood dream thing, but I've grown passionate and I've grown to love it. And it was like, okay, well, I don't know what the next 5 years of my life hold. I don't think really anybody knows what they are, is no
Yeah,
matter how much they try to plan it and try to foresee these things by doing actions to kind of lead to those steps. I think the uncertainty is a powerful tool. We look at it very negatively, I think, as a cultivated, like a
yeah,
culmination group. Like we look at it as a way to, address negativity. Actually, I think like uncertainty for many people, a synonym would be negativity or like
mm-hmm.
fear or like stress itself, right? What we're talking about. And I think trying to get a better understanding and gather your thoughts about what exactly uncertainty can bring,
Mm-hmm.
both good or negative, and try to
Yeah,
bring that into the conversation, because I'm afraid that it's too often associated with the negativity, and that garnishes a lot of fear. And favorite word of the day is garnish for some reason.
garnish.
So
Yeah, that's weird. But
let's
like,
do
were you
it.
cooking? Were you cooking earlier?
Yeah, I actually made
Watching like
salmon. So
Hell's
I made
Kitchen.
salmon yesterday and I
um,
garnished it.
so let's talk a little bit more about ways to deal with stress,
Yeah,
health,
for sure.
like in a healthy way. You mentioned talking to people. I think that's one of the most important things,
Yeah.
is giving people uh, an attentive ear to kind of hear the things that are bothering them with someone that you're close with and can trust, like a friend or something. Like doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist,
Yeah.
to kind of give
Although
you
that
that
we do
that
promote
outlet.
that, but
Oh
yeah.
no,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I'm saying is,
I know what you're saying.
yeah, it's a lot of times, sometimes a quick conversation with a close
Yeah.
friend or
Yeah.
like can really ground you in the way
Mm-hmm.
that you like can work through, because when all those ideas are kind of floating around in your gray matter in your brain and everything, right? Like it's hard to sort through that. So I think
Yeah.
journaling is another thing that I think not a lot of people do, um that has helped me in the past. I've shied away from it,
Yeah.
for no real good reason, just laziness, I guess. um
Yeah. Same
Also,
here.
breathing and meditation exercises. I've talked about that a bunch on here, but
Mm-hmm.
that's helped kind of just like reset and get to, and as dumb as we've said, like counting each breath, one,
Yeah.
two, up to as many as you can remember, and then kind of resetting. I think that's really challenging, but also a good way to just reset and like prioritize your problems after that, and
Yeah.
think and have a clear mindset, because a lot of times when you are stressed, you're going to act on your emotions, and that's a lot of times never good. Speaking from personal experience with that.
Yeah.
um
Exactly right.
I
Some really
mean,
good techniques.
but there is the downfall of getting into like increased tobacco and alcohol and other substance use, and that's from the CDC. And I know a lot of people don't trust the CDC anymore. So um, take this source with what you will, because a lot of people just don't think that they're
credible anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
But yeah, like
again. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, and the physical. You guys ever do an episode before? No. The physical reactions and like the difficulty sleeping and those things, like that's why. And I want to get into this a little bit because I need to just get into a routine. But having a set schedule that causes you to be disciplined, I think, is great for battling through like a lot of things, like laziness, for example, right? Like I'm good these past 2 weeks, like I've gotten my stuff done, but like I just haven't felt productive in the way that I wanted to, and intentive. Like my intentions for the week, like I'll write down, my top 3 goals for the week or whatever, and like I don't meet them the way that I want to. So I think, forming a set schedule is one of the best things that you can do, especially to kind of get yourself on the right track and build those good habits. Like for me, it's going to be, getting up, kind of just like waking up, have a cup of coffee, write down, like plan out my day, like block by block for like hours wise, like 7 to 8, I'm doing this, like that kind of thing. I think just staying on top of schedules too is important. I don't know if that's something you do, and I know you tend to get up earlier, but it's the end up sitting on your phone for a half hour, checking scores and like doing whatever that can be. And then next thing you know, it's an hour, and then you go and get a snack, and the next thing you know, you go back on it, or you just watch TV. Now that's a good way to like cope with stress too, like watching your favorite show or just kind of like shutting your mind off. But again, like everything with life is this balance of staying in the middle. And well, we talked about that with like Michael Leavis too. Sorry, this is my last thing. But like appreciating the lows so the highs feel that much better.
Love that. That's such a powerful statement.
It's so hard to do too, though.
Yeah.
But it's so important.
Yeah.
Because like on your worst days, like it sucks. But the next day, who knows? You might have a great day. Sorry, I'm done.
No, you're good. And I love that you kind of transitioned with that, because it goes hard when you think about it, like the idea behind it, because I'm sure a lot of people will do this, and I'm definitely not the only one, but when you sit down and you like itemize your past experiences, and like negative or positive, you sit down and you look at them, you can do a really good job of like figuring out, well, what does this do for me? How did this impact me like in whatever way? And I've started to realize like how grateful I am that sadly the negative things happen to me. Like how grateful I am that, such and such just didn't want to be friends with me anymore, or such and such school didn't accept me. Like I'm happy for these things, because yes, at the time it was like not devastating, but like for lack of a better term, just a really low blow to your confidence and to your kind of like your feeling of like, oh, I'm good at what I do, or I'm a good person or whatnot. But then when you're able to sit down and reflect on those things, you're like, well, wow, that when I get to that high point, it's going to feel great, because I know and I appreciate how bad this feels. Positive stress that I was talking about, or that you and I were talking about, right? Like with like pushing you to be better and pushing you to do these things and getting you ready to go and amped up. And I just think it's incredible that, like, sadly I wasn't able to have that conversation with him, because I was myself enduring a low point. But we were able to talk about it afterwards, with Instagram messages or whatnot. And I was grateful for that message, and that you brought it up kind of revitalized that. Like, that's a really good statement. But kind of just quickly, like how I do it, like how I deal with some of the stuff going on with me, is kind of appreciating the beauty that being able to take a breath contains every day, right? Like you're able to sit down and you and I are breathing right now, and there's people that can't. There's people that can't or have stopped and like without any control. Like it's devastating stuff, and it's not trying to get down, but you have to be grateful for those tiny, tiny successes in life. It's the little victories that make everything worth it. And so for me, it's something that people take for granted every day. But I have an east-facing window, and I get to watch the sunrise every morning come up. And I'm fortunate that I live on the eastmost side of town, where there's nothing to the east at all, and it's just field. in trees, and being able to watch it come through the window and actually like hit me and shine light on me.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on, because granted, I'm probably up before the sun's coming up anyway, just how I'm wired. Whatever I'm thinking about, I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
how can I feel stressful when I'm witnessing something that, if we're going to get down the evolutionarily path, like, one in a, billion times a billion things can ever, like an event that can be witnessed, right? Or if you just think about it, there's people that aren't able to experience this right now. So I'm going to make the most of it. And that's something that I try to do every day.
Yeah.
Except when it's cloudy or rainy and stuff in the morning. But it's something so simple that I never realized like how important an east facing window could be for my mental health, right? Or like a west facing window to watch the sunrise. But for me, I'm a morning person. Yeah. So starting my day off, right? Like, you got a cup of coffee and I'm watching the sun come up. Like how can you get upset? Unless something catastrophic is going on, of course, but like the little things that are bothering you, they kind of they go away for me anyway, seeing this event happen. And it's like, if I could repeat this every day, I would. My cortisol levels would be loving me right now.
Yeah, I think that's important. I'm happy you said that too, because I've noticed that too. Like if it's a really rough day, I like start to think about like the biology of things and how sound like, and how like what all has to happen just in order for you to like take a breath or to like move around.
Yeah.
Like it makes your problem seem so minuscule when you kind of do that and you just like shut your brain off and just like listen to the space around you, even if it's outside. Hearing cicadas all night for the entire fall, or just like resetting, I think is important. And unintentionally, it looks like we got almost everything off of the CDC website. As I'm just kind of like looking at their website on stress, ways to cope, and we didn't see this, I swear. But it covers a lot of it, and I think, right, like I said, like getting in that routine and being diligent with your sleep, and that's such an important thing. But so do you want to get into the second half here and we can talk a little bit about more kind of like a community update thing, and then we can kind of hint towards next week. All right, we'll do that. So stick around if you want to hear about that. All right. When you told me what you did, I was honestly like taken aback. I was like, whoa.
What you mean?
I did not expect you. No. I did not expect you to run for this. It kind of threw me off. But if you want to share with the class, share with the class what happened.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, and obviously that's everybody because it's kind of new. I was reading emails one day, and an email came through about graduate student senate, and my only political background or political like kind of like understanding was AP U.S. government politics in high school. So I kind of remember like that stuff. That's about as much as I try to delve into the logistics of everything. But I kind of was thinking like I'm really new here, obviously, and I already know a good amount of the people in my cohort, and like I've been able to work with people in my lab. But what I want to try to do is interact with as many people as possible, because I think it's just good for good for you. It also can maybe develop long-term connections like in the business setting or personal or like whatever it may be. It's just I feel like it's a great opportunity for that. And on top of that, I'm able to help out my program by voicing the opinions, the concerns of them in order to try to better the graduate community within my program as well as the school itself. And it's kind of like a little microcosm for the theme that we try to run here on the podcast, right? Like we're trying to give back. We're trying to do the things that we think are necessary in order to, be the best people we can be for the world and for other people.
So I want to take back a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you think, and this is not a plug for the pod, it's just curious, like if we wouldn't have started something like this, do you think you would be in the same position to like put yourself out there for something like that?
Not at all. And that's something that I think that's
like actually question. You're not just like
No,
You're
I'm
not just
being
like
dead
hitting a
serious.
softball and
No,
okay.
this isn't like this isn't like baseball password where you like,
Yeah, I
no.
swear I knew it was Jimmy Rollins.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. You're exactly right. And I think what this podcast has done, if it hasn't done anything for anybody who's listening, like I know we've done a lot of stuff, ACS stuff, but I think podcasts in general are excellent for if you have fears of public speaking. Speaking in public is like, I think there's a poll every time I took a public speaking course. There was always like that statistic that started off where it was like, what are people most afraid of? And like death and like public speaking are always like number one, number two, flippy flop. Like that's incredible to me. And the fact that we're putting ourselves out here for people to listen and like watch us, like it just speaks to I didn't have a fear of public speaking, but I always got that really, really bad anxiety, like the clammy hands and like,
Sure.
The leg that wouldn't stop bouncing kind of a deal. Like people
Mhm.
get nervous for that because you don't want to mess up. You don't want people to think negatively of you. But
Yeah.
this outlet, I'm telling you, it's been incredible for that. Like you and I are going into fields, especially where being able to communicate what you find is crucial to the progress of either your project, other people's projects, administrative work, whatnot. And so like
Mhm.
getting more practice at it and just realizing like, okay, if you're wrong, yeah, you're embarrassed for like 15 minutes at most because like somebody's
Mhm.
got to say like, oh, you're wrong this way and this way. But you learn really, really quickly, and the environment adapts to you, and you adapt to the environment, in which makes it a really good practice arena for speaking. And so yeah, I think you're right. You answered the question. Like I don't think that I would have accepted or like have applied to be in this position, as I don't want to say like the voice of the program, but the voice to the graduate council, like the graduate senator council. Like I don't think I would have done that without this sort of outlet that we do every week. So
Yeah, I think again, it's a way to kind of get yourself out there and like I did forensics in high school,
yeah,
and kind of competed, for conference, things and state things and when you're doing that too, like they always say, like, okay, well, if you don't want to look them in the eye, kind of just like look at the wall directly behind them and just
yeah,
like make it
right,
a point,
right,
right? And like to kind
yeah,
of these little tips and tricks to kind of make you um, you know, more effective in your
mm-hmm.
public speaking. But
Exactly
it's
right.
a very scary thing, and it's still like like imposter syndrome in like seminars.
It's crazy.
I don't know if you're
Yeah,
like in a position where you like share a lot of points and things, but like with us, it's like discussing the material, and it's like,
yeah,
well, I don't know if this is gonna like take off, but I'll input it. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
it's scary to kind of put yourself out there, like we said, but that's the only way you're gonna grow. But
Yeah, I think your outlet does a really great job of like that true professionalism in like speech. Like, right, you have to put out an idea that you believe is right. You have to like stand behind it, and you have to like let that
yeah,
kind of like you have to like throw it out there, and then like whatever wants to attack that or whatever wants to like go after that, you have to be able to defend it. And that's kind of like what the entirety of graduate school curriculum is, right? You have to defend your thoughts and back them up with claims of evidence and research that you conducted, right? Like that's the whole point. And
yeah,
like for me, like an example, because I not only like that, but like the research aspect that's tied directly into it, there's like a really big monetary value behind the procedures and the experiments that I do or that
yeah,
my lab does. And like if you're not confident in what you do and you mess up, that like we were
yeah.
just looking at money the other day, like electroporation cuvettes are 50 or $100 a pop or something like that, or like $10 a pop, like crazy. And you
Mhm.
do one and it messes up all the time. So it's like you realize how incredibly
Mhm.
expensive stuff is. So it's best to be as prepared as possible. At the same time, it's like you got to be ready to defend your ideas. That's the
Yeah,
most important part.
that,
Like you have to be prepared.
yeah, and the confidence that comes with like preparation, I think is huge too. And kind of knowing what you're doing inside and out, and it's because if you're skimping on something, then you're not as confident in what you're doing, and then next thing you know, your
Yeah,
ideas aren't going to come off as confident. It's just a spiral. But
yeah,
um, next week, what do we got on tap for next week? On tap, nice.
nice.
I think guests are returning next week.
Yeah,
We
we're
have,
hoping so. We'll have
yeah,
a good one.
and then can't say anything yet, but we got some fun stuff. Not fun. We got some stuff plan for
Let's
the
just say
future. Hopefully,
professional stuff. It's pretty
yeah,
professional. It's kind of cool.
yeah, we're excited to kind of see where that goes and kind of have to get moving on some of that. But we
Yeah,
appreciate your support.
yeah,
Again,
for sure.
find someone to talk to if you're feeling stressed. Get some
Yeah,
sleep.
I think it's the best
Go
medicine right now.
outside. Go
Yeah.
for a walk. Watch a sunset, like Austin was saying. Watch some
Or
baseball if
sunrise.
that's your
Yeah.
thing. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sunrise.
Or watch some John Boy that helps you.
Yeah, find whatever works for you, man.
Yeah.
We will see
Plenty
you
of really good
next
outlets out there.
week. If you got any questions for us or
That's right.
episode ideas, game ideas for us to do, let
Yeah.
us know. But until then, we'll see you.
Thank you for tuning in.